Hello, champion. Nicholas here, aka your shrinking Bansko. Today I'm bringing you an interview with emotion freedom technique coach and academic counselor Eleni Vardaki. And yes, we'll be diving in a lot of stories in this interview as well and looking at the connection between mind and body in a way that I think is not usual. Uh, all the stories that will be presented are, I think, very entertaining and engaging, and we will be looking at some of the systemic aspects of this practice as well. The word emotion freedom technique sounds very new agey, doesn't it? And I think honestly, it was born under that star. But 40 years on, this emotion freedom technique is mentioned in Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score and is more and more endorsed by him himself in his new trainings all around the world. What I appreciated most about this interview is all the divergent ways in which we tried to understand EFT, the tapping technique that Vardaki will teach us. And also the fact that we went into the practice. We actually did the thing, and you're invited to come along and practice with us.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of 2025 for our All About Trauma. This time we have a very special guest. We have an educational consultant and an EFT tapping coach, Eleni. Eleni, thank you for joining us. And of course, my friend and colleague, Nicholas. Nicholas, thank you for coming on as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Renee. Indeed, the first interview for 2025. What a beautiful opportunity to dive into some of the connections between the body and the mind in this interview. So we will see why this connection is so strong with Eleni. Eleni, thank you very much for being on the show and taking the time to be here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here. So my name's Eleni Vardaki. I'm based in Athens, Greece, and I'm a therapeutic coach and educational consultant. I work with schools and I work with individuals of all ages. EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. It's also known as tapping, and it's also known as psychological acupuncture because we're tapping on known acupuncture points. And yeah, it's been around for 40 years, researched for 20, and it's essentially a stress management technique for helping with reducing our cortisol levels and helping, us go from our emotional brain, our amygdala, into our thinking brain. So I discovered EFT when I was 26 and I was suffering from PTSD. I didn't know it at the time. I just knew I felt really bad. I didn't feel well at all. I went to the doctor to the end. I was working in a school in England at the time, a secondary school. And I went to the doctor, the NHS, it's what it's called in England, the National Health Service. And lucky for me, fortunately for me, the doctor was trauma informed and could identify that I was experiencing trauma symptoms. And so they referred me to their trauma therapist, who was an EMDR specialist, EMDR trauma therapist. And in the first session, she gave me a diagram of the EFT points and just said, when you're feeling overwhelming stress, panic, anxiety, like when you're feeling overwhelmed in between sessions, just tap through these points. It didn't have the word tapping. It didn't have EFT. It didn't have anything. It was just the points. It was a tiny little diagram that I put in. And she said, I suggest you put it into your purse so you have it wherever you are. If you're out and about, you have it there so you can take it out and look at where the points are and tap on those points. And I didn't ask questions. I really didn't care. I was so desperate to get better. I was so desperate to get well. And I knew I wasn't feeling well at all. PTSD level of trauma symptomology can be very painful if anyone's experienced it physically, not just emotionally. And so, that's what I would do. And it would help me get through the week. It's all I needed, to get through the week to the next session. And so I discovered, EFT tapping without knowing what it was, without even knowing you can add words, didn't need to, because for level 1, mental health first aid, self-regulation type of application of this tool, you can do it on your own. You don't need your therapist to do it. You can do it on your own, and you don't need words. You just tap. And if you want to, you can breathe or focus on your breath as it comes in and out of your nose, but you don't need to. You just tap. And that in and of itself, research has found that within a few minutes, your cortisol levels go down, your stress levels go down, and it helps you regulate. So this is, I feel that there's 3 levels of tapping. There's that first level, which is for psychological first aid, which my story illustrates there. There's a second level, tapping for a specific problem, where there you need to bring words in. So you'll start with, even though I'm feeling really stressed right now, let's say. We start general, we go from general to specific. That's one of the principles of EFT when we're doing EFT for a specific problem, but we start general. So maybe you start off and your stress is an 8 out of 10 when you think about a particular problem like a phobia or a particular goal that, you want to work on and achieve. And then we tap and we go through the points focusing on the problem, right? So what is it that we want to reduce the intensity of? We focus on it. So there's that exposure therapy part of it, so that we expose ourselves to it, right? So that we can then actually work on, as we're tapping, neutralizing the intensity of that trigger and bring the intensity and the stress down. And then we see what comes up after that. And each time whatever comes up, there might be a specific emotion, there might be a belief, there might be a memory that might come up eventually. And then we can then work on memory reprocessing to clear that memory or neutralize the emotional impact it has and the physiological impact on our body. Now, level 3, so a memory that can come up that might be at the root of the problem might be traumatic, but it might not. So, but, if it is traumatic, we also have a trauma, it was a traumatic event, then we also have ways to very, very gently, we've got lots of gentle techniques in EFT. When you're working, obviously, with a therapist, I wouldn't recommend doing this kind of trauma resolution work with EFT on your own. So when you're working with EFT, there's lots of gentle techniques and tools to help with that. But my first experience of EFT in 2012 did not have level 2 and 3. It was just level 1, and the memory reconsolidation, trauma reprocessing step was done with EMDR, which I'll be forever grateful for, because it helped me transform that trauma into post-traumatic growth. So I want to share another story, which was before I had any tools. I didn't have tapping, I didn't have breath work, I didn't meditate, I didn't have any tools for regulating my nervous system and for managing stress. So we're going back to Christmas break of 1999, 2000. So we're heading back from Athens, and we were living in Islamabad at the time. And I was going to school there, and my mom had just given birth to my little brother, who was 2 months old. And we're in a plane. And, as we know with trauma, any enclosed space, whether it's a car, a plane, even a classroom sometimes can, or, exam room, like enclosed spaces can create the potential where you're either, where you feel like you're trapped type of thing. And so what happened was, I'll share the story from 2 perspectives, so you can see the consequences of not having tools, and how painful that can be, and maybe you can relate with my experience. So from my perspective, what I remember is the first memory is sound. I don't have visuals of seeing people. I just have sound memory. So I'm hearing my mom shouting in Greece, "To peditha pethani, to peditha pethani, to peditha pethani." That means the child is going to die. The child is going to die. So she's holding my presumably, because I don't have any visual memory of it, but I'm just hearing this alarm in her voice. And I remember physically, feeling terror. And My next memory is of stumbling down the aisle. So really overwhelming terror like I'd never felt before. I was 14 at the time, and it was very much, this was, we're belted in. You're not supposed to get up out of your seat unless you're allowed to, type of thing. But somehow, I don't even remember removing my seatbelt. I don't remember how I got to the aisle, but I just remember stumbling down the aisle, feeling like the walls of the plane are, and by the way, if this is triggering for anyone, if you've got a fear of, flying or what have you, you can skip this part, or you just tap on this point to help keep you regulated. So I felt like the walls of the plane were kind of closing in on me. Like there was no oxygen in the plane, and I needed to get out the plane. I needed to get out and get oxygen, that there was no oxygen in there. I was probably hyperventilating. I don't know, but I know I felt that I couldn't breathe. There was no oxygen. And next thing I know, I'm losing control of my body, what I'm doing. And unconsciously, I think my body went into flight, and I was in the aisle walking. And I think the thought was, we need to land this plane. We need to get my brother to hospital. Like I didn't know what was going on, but I got the sense of we need to land this plane. And then I fainted. So why am I? Before I say why I'm sharing this story, I'm going to share it from the perspective of my dad. So when I asked my dad, what was your perspective? What did you see? What was happening? Because this is what I remember. So he was like, well, your brother was crying and wouldn't stop crying. It's a 7-hour flight. It's a very long flight. And then your mom, you remember correctly, started shouting Tabitha Bethany, and she flipped her lid, as Dan Siegel says, where our thinking brain goes offline because our emotional brain gets so overwhelmed that if we flip our lid, we go into fight, flight, freeze, what have you. So so my mom was crying because she thinks she genuinely felt, trauma isn't just real threats. It can be perceived threats. So she genuinely perceived in that moment, she was experiencing traumatic levels of stress, that her newborn baby was going to die because he wouldn't stop crying and and then you were crying and your sister was crying next to you. And I was like, I don't remember crying, but he remembers us crying. So he was like, and I was like, and what were you doing? And he goes, well, someone had to stay calm because everyone was crying. So he didn't have training, on stress management techniques, any of these somatic techniques. He was using all of his cognitive resources to stay calm and to reflect on the situation. And he was like, well, I know babies don't die from blocked noses. So my brother's nose was blocked. My mom was desperately trying to calm him down. She thought maybe he's hungry. It's a 7-hour flight, she was trying to breastfeed him. That made him even more stressed because he couldn't breathe because it was only through his mouth he could breathe because his nose was blocked. Probably his ears were hurting as well, So to cut a long story short, this is an example of how emotional contagion can also cause a lot of dysregulation. So my mom was dysregulated, and she passed on her panic, her terror, her emotions on to me and my sister. And here's an example of me going into flight. You can't leave a plane. Once you're in there, you're in there. So you are kind of trapped. Freeze and freezing in terror. I must it sounds to me like I was probably crying in frozen terror, and faint or flop as it's known. So I didn't have tools, but when we did land, I went to the school counselor. Fortunately, I had a school counselor who understood about stress and the importance of teaching students, like somatic tools. So she taught me breath work techniques, and she taught me happy place visualizations, and I used those. But it took me 10 years to overcome my fear of flying, my association of a plane is not a safe place, because my brain had been rewired, right? And trauma is the impact. It's not what happened, it's the impact on our nervous system. So my brain and my nervous system have been rewired to feel like planes are not safe places. I feel trapped. I hated it. But we had a lifestyle, because of my dad's job as a diplomat, where we had to be on planes. Otherwise I'd be trapped in Pakistan. I had to get back home, to Greece. So, and then, I went to university in England. I had to get on a plane. I wanted to see my family. I had to get on a plane to come back to see my family. So like I had to face this. I didn't have a choice to avoid these triggers. And so I'm very grateful for mindfulness, for breath work, for helping me. I never had a panic attack again. They helped me stay regulated so that I can manage the anxiety so that it didn't get to that overwhelming faint and freeze state. But it was very painful, 10 years to get there. And so I love EFT because now I've worked with a client who was a child and I've worked with a client who was an adult. And it took months, not years, months to clear that association, that trauma wound of being in a car, being in a plane, what have you, is dangerous. And so it either causes panic or huge anxiety and overwhelming anxiety. So I love the EFT because it's gentle, but it's also fast. It's effective. So that and an example of how it's fast and effective also is another example. So now we're gonna fast forward to my brother is 24 years old. We're going to Brussels. So it's a short flight. It's about 3 hours. Is it from Athens, Brussels, something like that? Relatively short flight. But as we're landing, he was, it's winter. We're going for the winter holiday. So it's as we're landing, in the last 15 minutes, his ears start to hurt. Now, we didn't know why. But we knew that it was, I was like, is it hurting? He's like, yeah, it's quite a lot. So I was like, well, should we just start tapping? See if that can help with managing the stress of, we're in a plane and you have to kind of sit through it type of thing. And so yeah, he agreed. So we started tapping. The pain in his ears was 8 out of 10. And then as we were tapping, it went up to a 10. So we forgot words. When it's really high, you don't need words. It's level 1 tapping for first aid. So we just tapped, kept tapping, and it was a 10 and it wasn't going down. And so during those 10 to 15 minutes, we were tapping the whole way through. And I was so grateful. It was helping me stay regulated. And it was helping him, cope with those 10 to 15 minutes where you have to be in the plane until it lands and your ears are hurting and you can't go anywhere. There's no, And so, and when we landed, even though it was late at night, it was around 11 o'clock, so heading to midnight. And we'd never been to any hospitals. We didn't know how the system worked, what have you, but we went into problem-solving mode. So it kept our thinking brain online, messaging my parents to see which hospitals were available because his ear had turned red. So to cut a long story short, what we discovered was that his eardrum had burst in that moment. So he had a burst eardrum from being on a plane, the pressure. And what we discovered was that having a blocked nose can actually cause so much pressure on the ears, because he had a blocked nose, that it can actually cause a burst eardrum, when we didn't know that. But so I was concerned that because he had this experience and it was an enclosed environment, would he be able to get on the plane again to get back? Would it leave a trauma wound? And the surprising thing was that it seemed to have protected him. So coming to these levels here, using it in the moment seemed to have protected him from feeling helpless because he was doing something about it, from feeling powerless because he was doing something about it. And actually, he was fine getting back on the plane. Because the eardrum had worse, there was no pressure anyway, so it didn't happen again on the way back. And he's been traveling ever since. And actually, he went into growth, into from now on, whenever he goes on a plane, he uses like salt water to clear his nose if he's got a blocked nose. He has some with him just in case. to clear it in the moment. And he hasn't had, it's been a couple of years and he hasn't had a problem since. And it hasn't left him with any trauma wounding because in the moment it seemed to work preventatively. So that's the second, another example of why I love EFT. Third and finally, this is an example of working with a 12-year-old boy who had developed travel anxiety as a result of after a teacher in his school, his teacher died in a tragic car accident. And so that then transferred in his thinking to cars, planes, travel vehicles are unsafe. And a really big anxiety and huge worry every time his mom, for example, would go traveling because, would have to travel. So, he was referred to me by a psychologist, psychotherapist here locally who had done 4 sessions with the child and the mom using talk therapy strategies, and it hadn't shifted. What had helped was the mom had done some mindfulness and breath work on her own, kind of with the child, and that had helped to reduce the intensity of the anxiety. But it was like they'd reached a plateau where that was as far as the mindfulness and breath work tools could go, and the mom recognized that they needed to get to the root of what was keeping that travel anxiety kind of stuck in place, that it was causing him so much so it's affecting his well-being like that. So we did EFT sessions and focused on the body because tapping is a somatic therapy, a somatic tool. And within those 4-hour sessions, we started with half hours, and then we finished with 2 1-hour sessions to really be able to go deeper in the final part. In this case, it was what we agreed would be helpful. And so that cleared because we were able to go to the root of, and also use creative, gentle ways of going into what did that feel like in the body. And we cleared it with EFT, and it's been over 6 months now. That's not only, and this is the interesting thing, we weren't working on school performance or anything like that because he's a good student, and the mom and the parents are perfectly happy with his school grades and so on. But as a side effect to being freed up from worrying, if his mom was traveling type of thing, and all of that kind of that energy that was required for him to manage his worry and his anxiety cognitively, as a side effect of that being freed, because we'd cleared it from the bottom up through this somatic approach, he went from great to like outstanding, and he's like, he's really thriving. And both socially, again, there wasn't any, he was already socializing, but it's like really like thriving now socially and academically on a whole other level because of being freed up from clearing that travel anxiety that was called, neutralizing that trigger of thinking of vehicles and cars. So here you're seeing we used all 3 levels in these sessions. We used level 1, level 2, level 3. And as we do when we're working with trauma, we titrate. So we make sure to help someone, stay in their window of tolerance. We might come back to level 1 if needed type of thing before we then go back and into some level 2 and 3 work kind of thing. So now you might say, well, okay, there's these anecdotal stories, but is there research? So we've got hundreds of research studies. Many have been published in peer-reviewed journals, including A-grade, high-quality psychology peer-reviewed journals. Interestingly, not only does it reduce stress, so for example, in one study it was found that before tapping and after an hour of tapping, the cortisol hormone, which is one of the main stress hormones, in the participants' spit, they took a spit test before, a spit test after, had reduced by 37% after 1 hour of tapping. And someone might say, well, I can reduce my cortisol by going for a run. Yes, you can, but what we're working on here is when you think about the thing that triggers your stress response, we want to reduce your stress response while thinking about it. So we want to neutralize how triggering the thought is. So it's a different application of why we're reducing, the stress here. And less stress also leads to less pain. It's helped with chronic pain. There's been studies on chronic pain that have also even shown a before and after with fMRI scans that the brain actually changed in chronic pain patients after doing, a cycle of EFT sessions, to that of a normal brain that doesn't get hyper stimulated in that pain area, type of thing, as it would when they had when their brain was shaped more like someone who had chronic pain. So PTSD symptomology, I shared the example, the anecdote of it helped me. We've got research that shows it helps, EFT interventions helping bring people who are experiencing clinical levels of PTSD symptomology, and then post-EFT intervention, they no longer have those, are experiencing those symptoms. And we often hear Bruce Lipton, and if you guys have heard of him, he's, the new biology, who has done amazing work in helping us understand that, no, we are not slaves to our genes. There's such a thing as epigenetics, and we can change our genes. And in one study in 2016, we saw that immediately after one session of EFT, epigenetically, there were changes. So 72 genes were found to be differently expressed. So because it affects our physiology, it helps with blood pressure, it helps with cortisol, there's positive impacts, it changes on our brain. Epigenetically, it's working. It then has a knock-on effect on reducing our anxiety and helping with, for example, managing food cravings, which can be emotionally driven sometimes, or stress eating, emotional eating. So that's just a quick summary. You can learn more by looking up Dr. Peter Stapleton, that's where I've got, these slides from. She's leading the way. She's doing fantastic work on EFT for research. She's a clinical psychologist, an award-winning clinical psychologist based in Australia. And she's got an evidence-based EFT training hub, which EFT practitioners like myself for continued professional development, that's where I go to keep up with, and learn about the research and new developments in the EFT therapy world. So that's a little brief introduction to EFT and why I am so passionate about it. And I thought maybe we could now transition to actually getting an experience and seeing if maybe Nicholas, Renee, if you guys want to do a little tap and breathe, see how we could use it, and maybe a little exercise to get an experience. And I invite viewers to also tap along so they could also get an experience.
Okay, yeah, sure. Do I need to share my throat to the plan?
No, yeah. So we'll just start gentle. Let's start with where we're at. So first of all, let me teach everyone the points, because some people this might be the first time you're hearing about EFT, So let's just start here with the eyebrow point. And I invite you to notice if tapping with two hands feels more comfortable, or if you feel like just tapping with one hand. So just at the start of the eyebrow, gentle tapping. And you don't need to tap with two hands. So the clinical EFT tapping points, the ones that are, researched, you only need to tap with one hand. But sometimes, like for example, for me, I often find I like the balance. So I tap with two hands because I like that balanced feeling. And some people might relate, but others might just want to tap with one hand, or you might have a problem. Maybe you've sprained your hand, or you've broken a hand. So you don't need to tap with two hands, but just notice what feels good for you right now and just go with that, with what your body is asking for. Then side of the eyes, so just on the temples. So often these points, we intuitively go to them. So, when we're stressed, it's like, we'll massage these temples. So, and you can touch and massage them if you want. And that's perfectly fine when we're doing EFT. But you'll find that you'll get tired more, whereas when you tap, it's more sustainable. So you can then actually, under the eye is the next point. You can tap for a whole hour without getting tired. But if you were to massage these points, you'd probably get tired and you wouldn't be able to sustain it to the point where you can then focus on the emotional component, which is what we want to focus on rather than the physical. And then under the nose. And these are all linked to meridians in our body under the mouth, which interestingly enough, if you look up, there's a video called The Latest Science of EFT Tapping, I think, by Dr. Peter Stapleton. And you'll see she shows the meridians. They're not just energy. So collarbone is the next one. So yeah, if you just feel your collarbone just right underneath. And again, you can tap with one hand. You can tap with two, just see what feels comfortable for you. So yeah, if you look up on YouTube, Dr. Peter, and Professor, actually, she's now a professor, sorry. Professor Peter Stapleton has a video where she's showing that we've now discovered cutting edge research by putting dye into participants who agreed to this in research. These are physical symptoms. It's called the primovascular system. So it's not just energy. EFT isn't, yes, it's part of energy psychology, this new field of energy psychology, but it's not just energy. There's physiological systems that explain why these acupressure points, meridians are physiological systems we've now discovered are effective. And then under the arm. So here is just a palm's width under your armpit, under the arm, and just noticing your body. Notice, if you want, you can even notice your breath as it's coming in and out. And then top of the head. And then taking a comfortable breath in. And a nice long exhale.
Oh, that definitely did something. I there's so much to share. I liked how you asked me to check if it was just one or two hands that I liked. I noticed that I had so much more pleasure doing it with my right hand. Like just the resonance of that tapping on my right side was very noticeable for me than the left side. And so when I'm bringing the left side, it was more a sense of kind of encapsulating myself. I also like the double tapping, but it was more because it's like I'm sort of protecting or giving like kind of a bit of a wound to myself to do I don't know. I don't know. I can put words to it, but it felt like I was taking more protection and care of myself. But still, the more pleasure side of things was on this side. Another thing I noticed, and actually I've had this very spontaneously in life. I didn't know about EFT, but I was tapping here. I've been tapping here for many, many years. Wow. And here, what I noticed is that I would slightly shift my tapping a bit further down and a bit further up because the vibration goes to my thyroid gland. So when I'm stressed, the thyroid gland is responsible for stress hormones, and I just felt that I needed more or less kind of stimulation, but never direct because if you tap on the neck here, it's uncomfortable. But I would feel this kind of pleasure here. I think there is a nerve or something for sure. I would feel pleasure here, but then I would see like a wave, like waves travel on in a pond, and you know go to my thyroid, and then that would feel really nice. I don't think I can put more words. And I was feeling the same here right now. Like I was feeling that the vibration was going down to my eye and a little bit up the forehead, and that's very pleasurable to me. So I like that. And also what I was noticing is that you were inviting us to actually read our body and read our emotions. So that's very similar to a meditation where we start to breathe, and then we notice the sensations and so on. Yeah, am I saying something?
Yeah, absolutely. And tapping meditations are a form of meditation where we notice, I love mindful tapping. And this is something you can do in every day, like every day at the start of the day, just note, putting a timer on 2 minutes. I often recommend this to clients, or 5 minutes, like just tapping and just noticing, what am I feeling right now? What are my physical sensations? You know, before you go to work, before you leave the door, before you start working, like, what am I physically feeling? Am I feeling tired? Am I feeling an ache or pain? You know, emotionally, what am I feeling? Am I dreading this thing that I have to do today or something? Am I, whatever it is, am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling sad? You know, what are the thoughts? So it's like, maybe I don't want to, whatever, and so interestingly, I've practiced doing mindful tapping, observing what's happening in my body, emotions, thoughts, and I've noticed that after I do it, I would change the priorities in my day. So things that I felt, we've all often got projects that are multiple projects juggling at the same time. So something that was important but urgent before tapping, I might delay it, push it back, but after tapping, I'm like, actually, it's okay. Like, I can do it. It's not something that it feels, I go into flight mode. So I'd reorganize it so that I would do the things that are important but not urgent later. Um, and so I think that's an example of how just mindfulness, like you said, and tapping is one way. There's many others, like as other ways. But practicing it as a mindfulness tool is so powerful, of just noticing what's happening without judgment while you're tapping.
Building on that, though, I would say that there is something specific to the tapping, because after we had tapped all this point, I felt the whole sort of from shoulder up portion of my body energized. There was this kind of tingling sort of um, activation to it. I felt more alive, which doesn't particularly happen with the meditation. I mean, meditation has its pleasure side to it, but yeah, this EFT exercise we just did gave me that.
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic observation, because that's why I teach it also to school psychologists and counselors, because it helps, to feel alive, to feel alert, to feel focused. So it's wonderful for, yes, stress relief, but also concentration and focus. Because they want the kids to be focused and concentrated. They don't want to be so relaxed that they're ready to go to sleep. So they want their thinking brain online. They want them focused. They want them alert, that alert calmness, and it's very useful for that. Which means that it's for sleep. So when people come to me for EFT and they've got sleep problems, which can then also cause anxiety, so we want to help them regulate their sleep. Doing this before sleep, and I found that as well, can actually be quite activating for the exact reason that you observed. So I might, if I'm feeling very anxious or activated, I'll start with tapping. But if I continue, I'll be relaxed, but I won't be so relaxed to sleep because I'll be activated. So then what I've done is I'll switch to press and breathe. So you just touch and breathe. And then you just touch the points and breathe. And each one you can, inhale and exhale. I love inhaling for 7, exhaling for 11, ever since I learned it from The Body Keeps the Score, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's book. But you can do whatever form of breathing that helps you. And you just inhale and exhale through each one. And then as a third stage, once I've relaxed and slowed down my movements and in all of the physiology, then when you're really starting to doze off, you imagine touching or tapping through the points.
Wow.
Because their brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. There was actually an amazing study that was done that showed people imagining tapping on the points with an fMRI brain scan. I think it was in Germany, and they were looking at fear of flying, if I remember correctly. But that it worked just as well. There was physiological changes while they're imagining tapping on the points, and we have brain scans that show it still had an impact, which links to all the other research that we've known for a while now, that the brain can't always tell the difference between imagination and reality. So even imagining, visualizing, success visualizing, that putting, if you're doing a layup or you're doing a free throw, visualizing that you're doing it before you do it increases the chances that it will work, because the brain feels like it's practicing, type of thing.
Absolutely. I know of this research where they asked a controlled trial where they asked some people to imagine doing physical exercises and another group doing physical exercises for calorie loss. And both groups had lost basically almost the same amount of calories. If not the control group having lost it more calories. I don't want to push it further, but anyway, this connection between imagining things and actually doing them, and just the brain sort of processing that information very similarly. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, it's there for sure.
Wow.
But Renee, what was your experience here of this thing that we did?
For me, I really enjoyed this experience because personally, my habit has always been rubbing. So when I'm feeling anxious, I rub, especially my forehead or, but I realized that with the rubbing, it creates that friction and the heat. So that was an irritation. So with tapping, it felt more gentle. Even right now, the pressing, it feels that I can actually release more instead of the rubbing. When I feel the tense in my muscles, and I also leave tension and heat where I'm rubbing. So with the tapping, I feel it's more releasing, it's more calming, and it's easy. It even feels like a natural process instead of I have to expand and contract muscle when I'm pushing on myself. So that's my experience.
Love it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Many other things comes to mind. When I was 6 years old, I just moved to another country, and I lost my mother. My father had been married, so there was this new person coming into our lives. I was quite stressed. But anyway, I was also somebody who always naturally took care of other people, and I remember sensing that this new woman that my father was with was quite stressed, and so I started to take her wrist and flip it like this continuously. I would do this like they would lie down on the bed, and as a child, I would jump on the bed and run around and so on. Well, I by chance, I don't know, by intuition, but remember so vividly. I started to take her wrist and pushing here, right, which is also I think an acupuncture point, and
Yeah.
repetitively bring it up and down. And she was so amazed at how much it relaxed her that she kept asking me to do that. Uh, do you think this might be related? Because I know that you have come around this area before when you were tapping.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely there's a lot of, acupuncture points and acupressure points here that very help, and we can just massage them. So, definitely that's really useful here for relaxing. Um, and even around here on the edges.
Ah, yeah.
Interestingly, talking about the hand and fingers, so the side of the hand is we start there when we're using it, side of the hand, if we're working on a specific goal to tune into our body. So it helps tune in, but we've also discovered it helps with resistance, with psychological resistance. So, when people come to and want to work on something that they're stressed about, they're coming because they want to feel less stressed, but there might be a part of them that might think actually stress is good. And we've even got conditioning. There's people who are saying, yeah, but stress is good. And it's an oversimplification. It's like, well, you can't tell me that post-traumatic stress disorder level of stress is good. So there's grossly simplifying stress is good. And I think there's even a YouTube video that's got lots of views, TED Talk called lots of research saying make stress your friend. And it's like, tell someone who's suffered from PTSD, make stress your friend. It's like you're showing absolutely no compassion, and it's almost I need a tap because I get a bit vibrant. I'm like, it's almost offensive. And it's like, I think if they had experienced that level of overwhelming stress, they wouldn't generalize like that. Because yes, you've got stress and you can turn stress to positive, but there's some stress that you need somatic tools, like, it's not about being weak or what have you. It's that we all, at some point in our lives, well, probably, at least most of us, at least I have, I don't know, maybe we'll go through some very, very, very horrible things. And sometimes we need tools in the moment, or we need tools after the moment to help us get regulated again. And so I think that what work like the one that you're doing, Nicholas, where it's like bottom-up approaches, including bottom-up approaches in your therapy, and EFT tapping is doing, and EMDR, is bringing compassion to the fact that it's not just think your way into thinking positive. We can't just think our way into reframing the stress positive. Sometimes we need to feel and get in touch with the reality and be honest with how horrible we actually feel so that we can actually release it from our body.
so many things that come to mind again. We, a lot of the suffering that I meet in my work is suffering that lives in the head and that is separated itself from the body. And so, of course, EFT and anything that allows the body to be brought back online in a way, on in the system or in the dialogue, is incredibly important. I'm working with a client at the moment, a professional basketball player who has a tendon of Achilles issue, and we're working psychosomatically to establish a dialogue with that Achilles pain, uh, so that he regains agency in understanding what is going on, and it's working wonderfully. It's the pain is almost gone, and he just feels so much more able to intervene effectively moment by moment when the pain comes. He doesn't panic anymore, because when the pain is in a part of your body that you think you can avoid, like the mind can drive itself to think, I can just split off from my body and just live here, right? And that's where we amplify the pain signals. That's one thing. I was thinking that with the wrist, that there is a common sort of denominator with the FP, because there is a repetition. Like here we see a repetition. And it makes me think of these parrots that sometimes we see walking up and down, walking up and down, walking up and down to release stress because they are encaged. So the aspect of repeating something maybe has something to do with processing information, or releasing information, perhaps, or releasing. I know that, surprising and Glenn, kind of naturally, I know that I heal a lot in the bed. For me, the bed is like very much a healing place. When I, if I've had a very difficult client story or something, I get almost not a panic attack, but I get very overwhelmed. I go under the covers and I put myself in the fetus position. I kind of basically create a womb. Well, in all this experimentation, it happened that with one leg, I would start um to to cuddle myself, not to cuddle. How do you say, like to, I
Rocking, like in a
yeah,
rocking chair.
exactly. I would be able to kind of stimulate my leg in a way that took so little energy, but that would basically allow me to rock the whole body. And I noticed this connection between, oh wow, it's I'm almost using no thinking here. It's I'm able to do it for, as you say, 20, 30 minutes, and there's no energy being consumed. But that's another link to, like a natural link to what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think I agree that definitely the repetitive thing is it's soothing. We have implicit memories in our body of being babies and being rocked, because a baby to fall asleep needs to be rocked, and so there's that repetitive movement that is soothing. Or being kind of stroked on the top. Children maybe were stroked on the top of your head. So I once had someone where I was teaching EFT, and he said, this kind of reminds me of that. This is a part of the body, whereas my mother would stroke me, kind of thing. So it's soothing. We've also got a lot of nerve endings here. So physiologically, like when we go to, say, after, we go to get a haircut and they wash our hair, type of thing, we often feel relaxed when they do the massage here, because there's a lot of nerve endings. But I agree with your point, because it's like, even, I don't know if you've tried, I've done havening with havening, excellent havening practitioner, which is also a somatic bottom-up approach.
Yeah, I do this.
And yeah, and it's repetitive and it's soothing, and it's anything that is safe touch, safe touch and repetitive and soothing. And havening is also great for, for self-care and soothing. And coming back to your point about how, our work is demanding, emotionally demanding, and it can bring things up, especially, as empaths, type of thing. And it's one of the things that we've my EFT supervisor really recommends is, and training as well from Dr. Stapleton, that in between sessions, doing tapping, doing whatever it is, like consciously before and after, as a way of also taking care of ourselves, because it is it's a wonderful, it's a beautiful profession, and it's got its challenges. And so making sure we're taking care of ourselves before and after sessions is something that I found. I don't do it consistently, but I'd like to be more consistent with it. But I do sometimes do that because like you said, it could be you hear something and it's really you feel sad. Because you're taking on their sadness sometimes as empaths. It's like we can't help it. We are empaths. So I will sometimes tap after a session if I've taken on something that was the client's to clear it, kind of thing, through emotional transference, contagion.
Can I mention one more thing? Thank you for sharing all the things that you're sharing. And also, Renee, I just so much would like to hear from you a little bit more, but I would make one last thing before I shut up. And that is that in reading this book, which I often bring up on the lives that we have, touching the human significance of the skin. And in this book, I was reading that one of the peculiarities of touch is that, differently from vision and auditory stimulations and so on, touch is the thing that when we use it, so when I touch something, I not only become aware of that something, but in that moment, I also become aware of myself, right?
Yeah.
So touch is the only sense that allows us to have a real connection between the self and the other. And I'm thinking that at some level, when we touch ourselves, we are biofeeding our understanding of ourselves to ourselves. And so that sense of presence and that sense of I am alive and I am me and I am and I am body, it becomes that much more activated, that much more sort of front of our cognition, if you like, in a way, than it usually is. What
Yeah.
how do you respond to that? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that, and I think I absolutely agree. And I think that now more than ever, not just if there's something that transcends cultures. I know, Renee, you're in Kenya, you're like, we're all in different countries, but if there's something that is universal, is I think as a global citizens, as a world, we're coming. I think we need to come out of this I think therefore I am Descartesian kind of worldview of it's all about the head up, and as long as we just work on our academics and our thinking, and we'll be okay. And it's like, no, actually, like, you have to be for you to be. It's not just we're not just our thought. We've got emotions, we've got physical sensations, and so we need to move beyond simply I think therefore I am, and elevate our emotional intelligence, our somatic intelligence, and while doing that, therefore our academic, our intellectual intelligence, cognitive intelligence, because all of those feed into a higher level of cognitive intelligence. It's not an either or, but working from the body up is a really powerful way of actually elevating our cognitive intelligence. And I think it's one that deserves more respect moving forward in research and in field work.
Absolutely. This has wide repercussions, what you're saying, because even the hype that we put on ChatGPT, for example, and how destructive and this technology is going to be. Sure, it will create a lot of things as well, but it's very destructive to the whole ecosystem, and particularly we are exploring how destructive it is towards relationship, like what it does, to relationship and sense of connection. The fact that we're putting so much emphasis on this language-based tool is goes hand in hand with us having putting so much emphasis on the mind and the thinking rather than the body. It's not an embodied experience to use ChatGPT. It divorces us from the embodied experience. And we have created cultures that hype, the thinking, hype the cognition, and downgrades the feeling. The feelings are for animals. The feelings are for women. The feelings are for Negroes. The feelings are for all the minorities, right? For gay people. The feelings are for the sick and the mentally ill, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I am so another reason I'm so passionate about EFT is I feel it creates access for boys and men. I've had many boys, mothers say, I've taken my child to a psychologist, but they won't. How can you speak? How can you speak about your emotions when you've been shamed? Boys don't cry. Be a man. Men don't cry. And it's like, we all have tear ducts. When we cry from pain, cortisol is released from our eyes. You are hurting someone by telling them don't cry because they're keeping all of that cortisol in the body.
Wow.
You're shaming them, and I'm so glad that now we've got tools that can help, because often the first step is working on any shame about having panic or anxiety and realizing there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's a normal functioning of the body when it's overwhelmed. You have the exact same nervous system as a girl has, and so we need to remove this emotional oppression that has been put on boys and men. And I feel very passionately about it because I used to be a history teacher, and I was shocked when I first discovered about, suicide rates in history being higher for men than women. And then I went on to discover that even in my country here in Greece and in many countries, more men die by suicide than like a very, very significantly higher proportion. And I feel like we need to stop shaming, emotional expression in boys and men, and we need to create a safer space. And I'm so grateful that tapping is helping boys and men open up, have access to their humanity, and unwind some of that conditioning that was done, that freezes their emotions and then makes it hard to manage overwhelming and stressful emotions, because it's not manly to ask for help. Only, girls and women go to therapists, not men or something. Like, yeah.
I think maybe even I can come in is that what I want to bring out is that what struck me first of all is EFT, emotional freedom. And what I like about our discussion is that understanding that even from your story, that when the child was going through mindfulness, it plateaued. They were going through the mindfulness, the breathing, but there was a plateau. And like Nicola was saying, there was a disconnect. So the plateau was here. They needed to work from the bottom up. And what I might say and what I want to ask is that, does the working from the bottom up now bring out the true freedom? Does that mean freedom for men when they are finally able to express themselves? Freedom for men that I want to feel myself, does that bring out the freedom? And how significant is it for a child to recognize that freedom at a young age? That it's not just about facing my fears cognitively or making trauma my friend, but understanding that I'm an emotional being, and that's okay, and that frees me at a very young age going forward.
I have some thoughts, Nicholas. I don't know if anything's coming up for you.
I'm gonna zip it up.
So I think freedom definitely somatically helps us get in touch with, because often I think the thing with mindfulness and meditations that involve kind of getting in touch with here and now, they can sometimes be a bit more cognitively focused. So more about observing your thoughts and what's going on. And here with EFT, there's an invitation to go even further. So it's a great first step. And so EFT, I think, builds on that by really encouraging people to go, where in the body are you feeling it? It could be you're feeling cold feet. That you can't get in touch with the emotion. You don't even need to have any awareness of what the emotion is. A lot of men don't have an emotional vocabulary. They haven't been given access to that. They haven't, had the conversation, like the freedom to develop that type of language in their friendships, like girls have when they're talking, during break at school type of thing. And so they might not be able to identify what emotion they're feeling, but they can feel that their feet feel heavy and cold. And that might be a sense of, fear, but we don't need to label it. We just go with the sensation. Even though right now I'm feeling stressed and I'm feeling cold feet, or I'm feeling, this pain in my stomach. So you go further down than more the physical sensations that are external or kind of more from the head up. And sometimes, trauma wounding can lead to a sense of, because it affects our vagus nerve, which wraps around our stomach, which wraps around our, our lungs, our breathing, our throat. And so sometimes it might be the freedom to just, be with someone else and admit, even though I feel pain in my stomach, which even that is cut off from men sometimes, because it's like, oh no, don't show pain, don't show, what have you, just hide it, kind of thing. And being with someone else and saying, no, I feel pain right now, and I feel this pain in my stomach when I think about this stressful situation. That's freeing.
I was wondering, as we are coming towards the end of this interview, Eleni, maybe we'll have to have you again, because it seems like there's at least another half of a story or information that hasn't been presented here. But I was wondering, what are some of the biggest resistances that you witness in the public towards this technique?
Yeah, so I'm wondering on, I guess, systemic level, part of the resistance, I think, for example, with schools, where there's been many people who wanted to bring me in as an educational consultant to do staff training for their team of school psychologists, or their middle managers, or a group of teachers who are interested. And there's been resistance there administrative wise. I think a part of it is ignorance. They don't know. And so you're scared of what you don't know. But part of it is not wanting to know, because it might be that they haven't developed personally, perhaps, to understand the mind-body connection. And even the thought of doing anything that involves the body can be terrifying for people. So, I think we forget sometimes that some people in positions of power and influence, or the decision makers, have unresolved trauma in their body that they're carrying, and they might be resisting doing their own work. And so how on earth can you be open to understanding the value and the impact this can have on others if you're not willing to even try it and give it a go yourself? And immediately your defense mechanisms are going, oh, this is pseudoscience, or this is what have you. They're not even open to hearing the science. And no matter how much science you give to them, they want to live from the head up. They're avoiding getting into their body because, they're not ready. So I think a lot of it is decision makers institutionally who they themselves are not ready to do their own personal work, so that professionally they can also then step up and see how this could be useful for their own organization or school or what have you. Personally, it could be sometimes, it might just be that it's not the timing, that it's not the right time to go there in someone's life. Or it might just be with teenagers. There was once I worked with a teenager who we were tapping. We always tap on, skepticism at the start. Like, before we even do how stressed you are, like, how much doubt do you have that this is even going to work? On a scale of 0 to 10, well, I think I'm doubting 8 out of 10. And sometimes the block might be, the resistance might be because nothing's helped me. I've been to so many therapists before. I've been to, 5 therapists, what have you. I've been to all these specialists. No one's been able to help me. I'm just, I'm not going to be able to change this, to shift this, to what have you. And we tap on, even though, then they repeat, I doubt this is going to help me, because I don't think any method can help me. I don't think anyone can help me. Like, there's something wrong with me. I accept this is where I am right now. And we work through that until it goes down as low as it can go, for them to then be able to access the tapping on the actual thing. Because if we go straight to the actual thing, and in the back of their mind they've got this, well, there's no point because no one can help me. We're running before we can walk. So it's like, actually work on what's there, what's present, what the presenting issue is, and going at the person's pace is a key principle in EFT therapeutic coaching that I do. And it's normal. It's normal for there to be resistance, and we welcome it, we accept it, and we tap on it, we work on it. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much for giving your view of where the resistances might come. I think personally there are also big systemic avoidance mechanism that we instill in all of us, particularly through the educational system, which puts so much emphasis again on academic skills as opposed to this body-mind relationship. We only have 2 hours a week of physical education, and the rest we are supposed to just think well, or do great thinking, or do a lot of thinking, right? So there's a clear imbalance there. So of course, these becomes the professions that indeed make the legislations that we're talking about, the cultures, the principles of schools,
Mm.
and so on. So, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
I have
Got the review too.
I had a client the other day telling me she had been working with a psychiatrist for many years, and she was an older psychiatrist. It was like 70 plus. And she was very grateful of all the work that she had done with him. She was a training psychotherapist. But one day she came to him and said, what about the body? And he says, don't go there. I don't want to go there. I'm terrified of going there.
Yeah,
A psychiatrist, right?
yeah.
And medicine, of course, medicalization, and is another form of split, right? We just take the pill and the body will do what it needs to do. You don't need to know here. You don't need to connect. You don't need to feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so grateful. And I know you also, appreciate the work of Gabor Mate, because here is someone who was a doctor who respects and has understood the mind body connection. And that actually, when, medicine includes the body in their understanding of what is going on to help, working when they're working with their patients, it's really powerful. And I think more and more doctors are opening up to these integrative approaches are getting great results. And because we've now got things like where people can actually rate, so on Google My Business, on Google Maps, and we've got websites where you can find a doctor and give them a rating. And I think now that it's no longer just, well, they're the local doctors, so you have to go to them, or they're the it's like we've always gone to them, we'll always go to them. And now actually people are seeing, well, what are people saying in reviews? Like, where are people getting results when they go to a doctor? And I think things are starting to shift because of that.
True. Very much agreed. Renee, what's your last question or words?
Yeah, I think for me, maybe my last question, and actually, thanks for answering the last question before I dropped off. But I would say that what I understand so far is that when you're able to have a wholesome treatment, like this sounds so far, EFT sounds like a very wholesome treatment, whether it's cognitive, whether it's connecting with the body, and to get a wholesome treatment and to get a whole individual from their childhood up until adulthood, it takes different people to just have the right perspective. And if more people actually got to open up themselves to this kind of process and this kind of approach, I think more people will have healing. Like yours, you said yours took 10 years. And right now, for the people that you're taking through, it takes a few months. So you can imagine right now that something that people could have been putting on themselves, thinking it will take years to recover from and heal from, with the right facilitation, it's possible that they can go through burns. So I think my last quote is that freedom for most people and for many people who might be listening to about EFT approach is just possibly months away if they just open themselves to this approach.
What I love about EFT is it democratizes access, and this isn't something that someone needs to pay for an EFT practitioner to get benefit from. They can do their own tapping, and there are, so once they learn the tool, they can use it right away, right now. Like, that's all they need, just the points, just tapping through the points. And they can already start to make changes in their life and take back control, even if they might not be able to afford an EFT practitioner in their country or online, what have you. There's exciting potential for really helping healing in the world, and in all areas, not just somewhere where there's privilege and people can afford to pay for this.
Great. What I come out of this interview with is this sense that this emotion freedom technique is a very agentic intervention. It increases the sense of agency that we have towards anything that we are experiencing. And now you just highlighted how it actually increases the agency of the people because it's an accessible technique. So no wonder it goes faster because people can work without the counselor in between the sessions, right?
Exactly.
So in that sense, it really increases the power that the person has to operate on themselves and their hurt and their troubles, their anxiety, and so on. Yeah. Where can people find you? I love for people to get in touch with you, Eleni.
Yeah. So my website is just my name, elenivardaki.com. So, and they can find me I'm on Instagram if they just put my name in. And I'm on, well, I've TikTok. Sometimes I'll put some videos on TikTok because I know some people are on TikTok as well. So if they're on TikTok, they're on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on YouTube. Yeah, if they put my name in, EFT Tapping, therapeutic coach, EFT practitioner, they'll find me.
Thank you, Elaine, for coming on. Thank you, Nicholas, for engaging in this and getting us through also to experience with me this new exercise of tapping. So that's something that we might actually integrate in our just normal lives because it's very simple to do, a few minutes. And we look forward to getting in touch with you. And I hope most of you get in touch with Eleni to get more information on that. So thank you guys for those who have been watching. Until next time, when we have another interview, we see you. Bye-bye.